This is episode number 33, featuring artist Stephanie Birdsall. Welcome to the PleinAir Podcast from PleinAir Magazine. I'm your host, Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we dive into the world of outdoor painting, often called plein air painting. For those of you who don't know, plein air is a French term that essentially means outside. The French say plein air, others say plein air, but no matter how you say it, there's a huge movement of artists around the world going outdoors to paint. That's what this podcast is all about. It's brought to you by the PleinAir Convention, the largest gathering of plein air artists in history, this April in San Diego. You can learn more at PleinAirConvention.com. And I think the April one is getting very close to being sold out. You want to get into it. It's amazing. It's my desire to see more people fall in love with plein air painting, and you can help by sharing this podcast with your friends on social media or email, or just getting them out and telling them how to plein air paint. That's the best thing you can do. And if you have any feedback or request, email me, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Today's interview is brought to you by the Plein Air Salon Art Competition. It's the best place to see how you measure up against other painters, and there are lots and lots of cash prizes. Cash prizes for each bi-monthly competition, and then you can win cash prizes for the annual competition. Anyone who is a finalist in any category gets entered into the judging for the final. Main prize is $15,000 cash, but best of all, the cover of Plein Air Magazine. Your painting will be seen by thousands, probably tens of thousands, maybe more, who go into the bookstores and see it on the shelves of Barnes & Noble and other places. Enter at pleinairsalon.com. Well, I'm anxious to get right into this interview with this crazy lady, Stephanie Birdsall. Stephanie, welcome to the PleinAir Podcast.
Thank you, Eric. I am extremely happy to be here.
Are you going to be behaved today, or are we going to have to call you out for you're kind of a rebel, you know?
Don't you have a mute button you can turn on if I say the wrong thing?
Well, you won't say the wrong thing, right?
I promise.
Huh. Well, I thought it'd be kind of fun to take a little different approach today and talk to you, because you do a lot of things a little bit differently. You really are kind of a rebel, and I like that. I think it's refreshing. So why don't we kind of start from the beginning? How did this whole love or passion for painting begin for you?
I knew when I was a teenager that I wanted to be a painter/artist, a writer, a musician. And actually at the time, I'd been playing classical guitar and piano most of my life. And I'd done a lot of writing, and honestly, art seemed the hardest and the biggest challenge, so that's when I went after.
Really? Do you still play classical piano and guitar?
If I had a piano, I would. I also wanted to be a rock star at one point, and you can imagine that didn't work. But I have a guitar under my bed, and I play when I can. Oh,
cool. Well, we have that in common. We'll have to play guitar together sometime.
I better practice.
Yeah, me too. So you knew you were going to be some form of an artist. What happened? How did the art thing kind of take over your life?
Well, I grew up in Atlanta, and when I went to college, I went for a year in Georgia, a year at Southwestern at Memphis, and I felt like I wasn't getting a classical education, and I've always loved traveling and seeing the world. So I applied to 28 schools in Europe, had to go to one that taught in English because I only spoke high school French. So I went to London for a year and stayed there for 5.
And what school in London?
I went to the City and Guilds of London Art School.
Really? So you escaped pretty early.
I did. But I mean, to get over there at that age and have such a big life and city that was so different from Atlanta, I mean, it was nirvana. I was just on a high all the time, walking around under my own steam, going to the museums, going to class, and just being excited about it all.
Well, that's a great place to get somebody excited about art.
It is. But I mean, I still feel that way wherever I am, so that didn't change.
So were you studying, you were doing a classical education. You weren't necessarily doing art when you were in London.
I went to an art school that only had 90 students, and I thought I was getting classical, but we really weren't getting classical. This was late 70s. We had life drawing. We did some painting. I remember a few really great things out of it, but also the modern art and the abstract was very big then. So we weren't taught in a way, but it was interesting because the teachers that were teaching, a lot of them did have classical backgrounds. And the thing that I find so interesting is that the elements in all forms of painting are essentially the same. Whether it's color or value or shape or line in an abstract, in a landscape, in a figurative painting, all those elements are what make the painting beautiful.
Sure, absolutely. So you went to school in London, then what happened?
I came back to see my family for 2 weeks and never went back. I moved to Westport, Connecticut. I got offered a show in Greenwich, and so I just got a Jeep and a U-Haul, drove from Atlanta to Westport, relocated. I never even went back for my things.
And the first show, how did it do?
It was great. It was mostly my etchings that I'd done in London and a few paintings. I didn't sell a lot, but it made me feel like, whoa, I'm going to be an artist.
Yeah, yeah. So have you, since that time, mostly made your living as an artist?
I wish I could say I had, but I cannot say that I have.
All right.
I mean, I did what you do when you're in your 20s and you want to be an artist. You wait tables, you bartend, you do all that stuff.
Right.
And I have to say I'm envious of a lot of the young people today that go straight into the art career, but I became a mother, had 4 kids. I sold real estate in Southern California for a while and finally got back to where I could do it full time. But this is the thing. Even when I was working other jobs, I had an easel set up in my kitchen, whether I was painting at night or on weekends. And the thing that I realized that is so important is once you start seeing things as a painter or an artist, you can never lose it. You immediately translate. Even when you're not painting, I feel like you're learning because you look at things differently. I mean, I'm looking at a plant right now and I'm drawing it in my mind, the dark shape. I don't know, it's some kind of a palm, the light falling. It changes in your brain. And I think that happens really early on. I think it happens the first time you pick up a paintbrush or a pencil and you start taking things apart and looking at them and trying to reproduce them. I think you have some intrinsic thing that happens to your vision, and I don't think you ever get rid of that. So I look back at the years that I wasn't actually physically painting every day or once a week, and I realized that I was seeing as a painter. So I think I was growing at that point too, and I think that's a really wonderful thing to know that we never stop that.
Yeah, so you're constantly in training, constantly looking at things and trying to figure them out, and also appreciating light and color and shape from a completely different perspective than you ever did before you were a painter.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So you raised your kids, and then what happened? You decided to become an artist again? Even though you were doing some painting and drawing, sounds like you obviously wouldn't have had much time to do much else.
No, but there was a point where, this being an artist is something that sort of gets inside you, and I don't think you ever get away from it again. And it grows and it builds. And I got to a point where I couldn't stand it any longer. And I was living in La Jolla, and my dad had given me the big Rembrandt set. My dad was a classical violinist and creative guy, and he enjoyed that I was an artist. And so actually when I was in art school, we went to the art store and he bought me this huge set of pastels, the big Rembrandt set. And it sat for 10 years. I never touched it. And at some point I found it and decided I wanted to learn pastel. And it's got to be close to 20 years ago. I went to a pastel class. It took off and I became a full-time artist again. I had a baby at that point. I had in fact, I think I found out I was pregnant while I was taking the course, but that just got me going again. And it's sort of, once you pick that up, it owns you. You can't get away from it, and you don't want to get away from it. So
are you primarily pastelist today?
No,
I didn't think so.
I started as an oil painter, and the pastels were an accident, but they seemed a less messy sort of way to go, and I was curious about them. And really interesting, great story. I don't know when it was, but at some point all those years ago, I think it might have been in 94. I can't remember exactly. No, maybe it was, I hate to say 204, I can't remember. But when Richard had a retrospective.
Richard, for the listeners who don't
Richard
know,
Schmid.
You're referring to Richard Schmid.
Richard Schmid, my hero. He was having a retrospective, and I went up to the retrospective and met him. And he actually invited me, as I think he was being nice, to come sit for the Putney Painters in Vermont the following spring. Or actually fall, I went up, sat for them, got to know him, and he said, if I can ever do anything for you, let me know. And I said, of course, I'd like to paint with you. And I'm sure he's just being nice, but I'm like a dog with a bone. If you hang it out there, I'm going to go after it. So I went up to PleinAir with them. And at that point, I was working in pastel. And he looked at one of my pastels and he said, if you're doing this in pastel, why aren't you working in oil? So then I took up oil again. And I didn't quit the pastel, but I definitely started in oil again. And I tried to figure out what I was seeing in my pastel and getting to my oil and how to merge the two of them. And actually, if you were to walk into my studio, I've had people not know whether it's a pastel or an oil because I paint my pastels very much like I paint my oils.
So are you still doing both?
I do both. There was a time when I was living in Florida that I used to have both of them in my car. And I was down on the beach one day and I had started a pastel. And it was, I always like to go out really early in the morning, 7-ish or something. And I had a pastel started. I took everything out, but the light had changed. Actually, the light was going in and out. So I thought, well, wow, this is going to be fun. So I set up my oils. And so when the sun would be out, I'd do the pastel one. When the sun would be in, I'd work on the oil. And I look at things and sometimes I go, wow, I wish I was doing this in pastel. Wow, I wish I was doing this in oil. So, if I could be ambidextrous and work with my left and my right hand at the same time, I'd probably do both. I love both of them. There's something about the smell of oil and the feel of the oil that's just really exciting to me, but there's also a nice way to glide a pastel across a sanded surface that's really exciting. So I do more oil at this point than pastel, but I love them both.
There's an artist by the name of Cynthia Rosen who paints 2 panels at one time. She'll set up 2 scenes, and when she has her brush in one particular color, she'll work on that color on both paintings, looking at both scenes. So I guess you kind of invented that, huh?
I don't know. I'm really greedy, Eric. I can never get enough. So if I can do it in this, I want to do it in that and do it again and again and again. And it feeds my soul when I'm working, especially outside. It's just, I can't even explain it. It's just heaven.
Well, I want to talk about outdoor painting in a minute, but first I want to go back. You talked about Richard Schmid. Talk to me about what Richard has meant to you, what kind of things you've learned from him, because most of the people listening probably never really get a chance to meet him in person or get one-on-one with him. So you get to be the surrogate, so to speak, and let us understand what that's been like. I've had that opportunity. I've painted with Richard, beside Richard, and spent some time at the Putney Painters getting painted, and so I've had that experience, but I'd like you to share yours.
How many hours do we have? Days?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Everybody just put your pajamas on. This is going to be a while.
Exactly. It's almost too big a subject matter, frankly. And I have to add Nancy Gusick, his wife, into this as well, because first of all, let me just go to the Putney Painters. The support system that we give each other and the acceptance and the love is just, it's an amazing group to be with. And that is founded, it's an overflow of Richard and Nancy. One of the things, to have someone, first, I'm just being really honest, to have someone as great as Richard And Nancy take the time and respect me to even talk to me was a huge jump for me. Because it's so easy to go into a group of painters and feel less than and feel insecure and be afraid to paint. And I see that in my classes all the time. And I, through painting with Richard and the Putney Painters, I started to realize that it's not about how well I paint. It's the fact that I am painting and the respect that I get from giving it my best. And so that it's not about learning. That wasn't about color and shapes, but I think that's a huge thing that we have to give each other. And Richard definitely gives that. He respects you for who you are and that you're doing it and that you're sincere in your intention and that you're hardworking. I just have to throw that out there because that's important.
Well, I think that while we're touching on that, I think that's a really important thing because, and I did this. I still do it once in a while. I'll be painting and I'll take a break and I'll go look at what somebody else is painting, and then I'll start feeling really badly about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But for the people who are listening who might be new to painting or might be a little insecure about it, I hear from people all the time who I'm not good enough to go to the PleinAir convention, for instance.
Exactly.
And that's just silliness because we've all been there. We've all had to paint dozens, probably hundreds of really rotten paintings before we got to the point where we were halfway competent. Some of us are still on the path of trying to figure it out. And so there's no reason to feel like you're being judged.
You're not being judged. I still feel that way. Put me out there with some of these people, and I still feel intimidated, but I'm so grateful that I get to see them paint or be around them and talk to them and hear their ideas. And I have to segue into this, and I'll get back to Richard, but one of the most exciting things to me about the convention is getting to watch my idols and listen to them do something, because how often am I going to get to, if I go to last year, George Carlson? He never goes out there anymore. To have been able to watch him, or T. Lawson, or Len Schmiel. I mean, I'm going backwards on this, but I get so much out of just hearing them talk and be human and seeing them paint. It's otherworldly.
Well,
to me,
and I think it's a special moment in time. I was thinking about what would it be like if, this were the days of Monet and the Impressionists, and would they attend something like this? Would they be a part of something like this? They were a very special period in time, and I think this PleinAir movement that we're experiencing is also a special moment in time. There's no guarantee that this is going to go on in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or 50 years, and there's no guarantee that something like this will keep going on. If I get hit by a bus or something, it's over. And I think that hopefully that doesn't happen, by the way. But
just watch yourself when you're crossing the street.
But I think that for the people who have experienced this and understand what it's all about, it's not something that has ever really existed before.
No, I think that's true. I think this is a kind of a one-off every year. It's a one-off.
Yeah, there was an event called Weekend with the Masters, which was put on by American Artist Magazine, which is no longer. And that event, they did that event 3 times, and then it ended. And ended because my understanding is that there were financial difficulties, although I don't know that to be true, and I don't want to spread rumor. So hopefully we won't have financial difficulties, and we'll be able to keep this moving forward. But I think it's pretty interesting time to be a painter. There are more good painters at high level today than I can remember in my lifetime, both on the landscape and plein air side, but also on the what I would call classical realism side. I don't know if there has ever been a time in history when there's been so many great painters. And of course, we have the benefit of being able to share what we're doing online and see what other people are doing and learn from one another. And I think this is a really special moment on this earth that we're experiencing.
I agree. I think we live in an absolute renaissance. And in our country, and I spent a lot of time in Europe, we have an amazing amount of art supplies and opportunities, whether it's workshops, conventions. We have access to such phenomenal materials and people that we can learn from. The workshops. I mean, I have done my training, I really feel, has come out of my workshops and my painter friends and the Putney Painters and Richard. I mean, I've had so many opportunities to study with such great people that I didn't get in art school. I mean, I came out of art school with a few things, which I actually bring into my workshops because they were pivotal. But the education I've gotten since having a life and going to workshops and demos and things has really been what is, I don't know if that's considered self-taught, but that's really what I've learned from.
Well, and and a lot of that didn't even exist when you got out of college.
None of it existed.
So you said something I want to get back to. You said there were a couple of things you learned in art school that were pivotal. What were they?
Okay. I have to refer to my workshops because I'm really impassioned about this. First of all, one of the things I've learned from Richard is color. The color charts are one of the easiest ways in the world that I know of to get to understand color and be able to paint it.
So people who don't know about the color charts, can you explain that?
The color charts are what I call Richard's basic palette of 12 colors. And you break them down into 5 values of highest key to lowest key, which would be white to black. And on the color charts, you'll have a predominant, let's just say alizarin crimson. So the color chart will be alizarin crimson dominant. So you mix that with each of the other colors on your palette. So it could be alizarin cad yellow pale, cad yellow deep, cad red, yellow ochre, etc. And then you break those down into the 5 values from light to, actually it starts from dark to light. So the last layer, which is a mistake people make, is it's really just a blush of color. It's just the basic tint of the white. But you do that with every color. So one of my charts will be predominantly alizarin, and then maybe my next chart will be predominant cadmium red. When I go to look at reds, I take both charts and I go, wow, is this more alizarin? Is this more cadmium? And does it have some yellow in it, some blue, some green? They're just a map. They are a color map. And I remember at one point, I don't know, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I always have this struggle with white. I love white. And I said to Richard, what's the color of white shadow? And he looked deadpan at me and said, get out your color charts. That was so true. So I still use them. If I'm in my paintings, I always have my color charts with me. I travel with them around the world. They're trashed. I need to make a new one, new set. But they have been magical.
And I think one thing that, it just sounds like a giant hassle. And it sounds like a lot of work. And I will tell people that some of the top painters I know, including you, of course, are doing this. And some of them are doing it in the way that you've illustrated. Some do it in other ways. But I went over to T. Allen Lawson's studio, and he's pulling out his color charts while he's doing his paintings. And he said, I cannot paint without these. And because, you can go from memory, but to be able to look at something and go, that's the exact color that I need, it's priceless. So I think that the emphasis needs to be on this is something we all should try. And I came home after that day. I've done color charts in the past, but I kind of forgot about them. I came home after that day and did a bunch of color charts. And yeah, it's kind of a pain in the butt to do them, but boy, they are helpful.
But Eric, listen to me. It's not about the pain. You can't look at it that way. It's about the discovery. Did you know that Viridian and Terra Rosa make an amazing, quiet purpley color?
I did.
Well, I learned that. Okay, I learned that through color charts. But if you look at it as the opportunity to explore color, and then you can take that color and use it, then it becomes really exciting. Do they take time? Yeah, but in the meantime, you learn to use a small palette knife and put paint on with a palette knife. So here you're learning all about color. You're learning how to use a palette knife, and your paintings are easier for the rest of your life. But come on, let's look forward to this.
Yeah. So that brings up the issue of color in the sense that, one problem I think I have is that I'm constantly being seduced by color. So I see a new color and I say, gee, I'm going to add that to my palette. And then it screws me up. And sometimes I find a new color that I find I just have to have and I keep using forever. But do you go through that kind of a journey? And when you add a new color, do you do new color charts? What do you do?
Guess what? Okay. When I was living in Tucson, painting the mountains, wonderful plein air palette knife painter said to me, "You're going to need, what was it? I can't think of what it was. It wasn't a magenta. I'll think of it when we get off. But it was a color that I had never used before." And so I went out and got a tube of it. And the first thing I did, because the mountains in Tucson, you were there last year, change so much depending on which blue you add to it, whether it's a morning, whether it's an ultramarine or a cobalt. I immediately went to, I want to think of that color. I immediately went and did just my first 2 rows. I took the color and did 1 row of the 5 values with the ultramarine and 1 with the cobalt, so that I knew which way it was going to go into the purples for the mountains. I mean, I did that immediately. If I got a new color that I loved, for me, and I do add things to my palette occasionally, but I love so much the knowledge and security I have having my charts and knowing what those colors are going to do for me, that if I arbitrarily throw something on, I'm probably going to do a color chart or at least some mixing on my palette first to see which way it goes, because there are a lot of colors that look like one thing but make another. And I mean, I'm absolutely seduced by color. I love color. And the clean color is one of the things that Richard gave me, because when you're only mixing 2 colors plus white, it stays so much more pure than if you're mixing 5 to get what you want. And by the time you get it, it's dulled down. So did that answer your question, or did I go off subject?
I think it did. I think it answered it beautifully. Thank you. So now, you were talking about pivotal things that you learned in art school. You brought up the color charts, which really came from Richard.
Yeah, they did come from Richard.
What were the pivotal things from art school?
There are 2 main things, and they completely relate to color, and we do them in my workshops. I told you I have this fascinated by white. I still haven't gotten white yet. And white flowers are they're my complete weakness. I love them. But the 2 things I remember out of my 5 years in art school in London was we were in this big studio, because the art schools over there have these huge studios. And my first year, actually, my tutor, professor, we called them tutors then, took a wall that was at least 30 feet long by probably 20 feet high and filled it with all white objects, all white. It could have been a white chair, a white ball, a white door. Everything was white, and we painted white for a week. And it taught me to see the differences in white. And then the next week, he did an all black still life. And what's so great, and my classes do this, is we do a white, and then we do a black one. And the great thing and you don't use black ever. Black is not part of your palette. You have to have white on your palette, but it's to make the light in the color as opposed to making a white. But if you're going to paint,
you never use a pure white in anything.
The only thing I would ever use a pure white in would maybe be the very center of a highlight, because I always am saying, what color is it? What color is it? What color is it? When I'm painting in my head or in front of a class or whatever, I keep saying, what color is this? What color is this? And what does it need? Does it need red, blue, or yellow? White has a color. White is a color. Black is a color. And so if you want to paint shadows, knowing all the different darks, you can call it black, but it's really learning darks out of blacks. But you realize it's green, and I never let people use gray. What is gray? Gray is a color. What color gray is it? Is it purple gray? Is it a green gray? Is it taupe? I like For me, defining the color as much as I can makes it easier to paint. So is this a yellow-green white, or is it a green-yellow-white? Is it lavender? Does it have more pink in it? I'm always saying to myself, what color is this? What color is this? To the point that I get sick of hearing myself. I say it out loud while I'm painting in my studio.
Yeah, the rest of us are pretty sick of it too.
I know.
So the other pivotal thing was what?
Well, the white and the black.
The white and the black.
Those two things. It's sort of like I got introduced to color all those years ago, and then meeting Richard and seeing how he paints and learning the color charts just completely blew my head off. I mean, I'm not the brilliant colorist that Richard is, but I use what he's taught me, and then I put it in the way that I see it. But the way he sees color, and Nancy Gusick, oh my God, the things that they do in their paintings, I'm still like so thirsty for that knowledge. I can't study their work enough because I want to understand it. They're magicians.
So are there any other things you want to share about Richard, or shall we move on?
Well, I mean, do you want a 24-hour, 48-hour interview, or do you want to move on? I learned how to see from Richard. Richard talks through his paintings. I have even learned how to do brushes and how he puts the paint on his brush. I've just learned so much. It's hard to break out because it's been over time. But the one thing I've learned is just to love what I do.
Well, I think that's the most important, because that's what drives you, right?
And I am driven.
So what are you really excited about and driven to do right now? I remember hearing you say something about lemons. What was that all about?
Eric, I can never get enough lemons. The lemons started with when I lived in Tucson. I had this fabulous landscaper, and he gave me a Meyer lemon tree. I'd never heard of a Meyer lemon tree. I didn't know that they existed, and this tree just flourished. And as a plein air painter, I would go in my backyard and I would paint. I'd paint outside. I would paint the lemons I would paint the whole tree. I would paint, vignettes of them. And as the weather changed, I started taking, and this is interesting for me, and I think really important, I started taking the lemons inside. And I would take a branch or a few of them, and I started, first of all, I was a plein air painter till I moved to Tucson, and the heat sent me into the studio and the air conditioning. But what I have never lost is my love and joy in things that are alive. So I really can't paint from photographs, because what I'm seeing from life, when I look at a photograph, the romance isn't in there. I can't find what I saw, and it comes to me over and over again. When I try and paint from photograph, it dies. So everything I paint is from life.
You never paint from photographs?
Eric, I really don't. I'm stuck in a painting based on one I did before that I tried, and I look at the painting. This is water lilies that I did 2 years ago in Italy. There's so much color and life in that painting. I did it from a water lily pond. Because I love water lilies and I'm having a hard time finding them, started one from the photos I had taken 2 years ago. I cannot find what I saw. I mean, I think I'm missing a link in my head. I have a really hard time transcribing. And so I'm trying to work off, the things I did for my painting and the sketches I did then to see if I can turn it into painting. Very seldom. I mean, in the old days when I did animal portraits or did occasional portraits, yes, you have to work from photos. And that's different. But I'm still so in love with what I can see, touch, and feel that is so exciting to me. I set up something and I'm like, oh my God, can you believe how beautiful that is? Look at how the light's falling on it.
So talk to our people about what you're really picking up as a plein air painter. Now, you said you're more in the studio now. Is that correct?
Well, now I'm in Connecticut in the snow.
Yeah.
So when the weather is good and things are out there blooming or not, I mean, I'm happy to go out and paint in the snow sometimes. It's a warm winter day, but I don't love the massive heat. I'm not a good heat painter. So, but what I've learned through plein air painting is how the light moves and changes. And so that's really key to me when I go into the studio. To me, they're the same if you're painting from light. It's how does the light move through the branches? How does the light come down the side of a mountain? How does it go across a valley? It's no different when I have something set up in my studio. How's the light moving across the leaves or the branches? How's it falling down the stem? How's it going across the surface? I love light, and I personally love soft light because I love being able to have soft edges and move in and out because I believe your eye follows the light. And then how does that affect the color? How's the color changing? Where is it brighter? Where is it softer? Where do your edges mesh in the darks? So to me, they're kind of the same thing. This sounds awful. When I'm outside and it's a beautiful day, it is just such a turn on to be able to be outside with nature and painting it. But I don't want to lose that, so I take that into my studio.
So you're taking studies outside and then copying those studies and enhancing them?
No. When I'm outside, I paint outside and I paint plein air. When I'm in the studio, I paint from life. But I paint flowers or vignettes or lemon branches. I paint living things, but my feeling about the light falling them is no different from how I feel when I'm plein air painting.
Right.
I'm looking for the same things. I'm looking for the shapes, looking for the colors, looking for the values. But the experience for me, I translate because I'm going from life outside to life in the studio.
Now, you've been, you were living in Rome recently for a while. Tell me about that. That sounds like fun.
It is fun, and the light's great there. And I have a friend there, and I have a studio set up. So when I can go over there, like maybe if we're having a blizzard or something in Connecticut, if I can go spend a month there, I do. Or if I can travel around Italy in the summer painting different things. I spent last summer in Venice. Again, different light. That's so exciting. And it looks so different from here. It's visually, all are visually exciting. I can be just as excited driving down a Connecticut road and seeing all the hydrangeas as I can be seeing an alley in Italy, but it's stimulating. To get different views and the history and the different architecture and the different, the stucco, the finishes on the walls, the doorways, it's really exciting and it's a challenge. So if you go from painting in Connecticut, where you've got all New England landscape, and you go to Rome and suddenly you've got, or Venice, or, it could be France for that matter. I'm sure it was in Cuba. You've got a hallway or you've got a window that's got peeling paint on it that you've never seen in your life. How do you paint it?
Well,
I had a lot of
constant challenge, isn't it?
It is. And I think as we challenge ourselves, we grow into better painters. That's the thing with lemons. I still haven't painted them well enough. And I just have to pass this on, Eric, because we jumped off it. The thing about lemons for me was taking them outside and bringing them into the studio. They stopped being lemons. First, it became about, oh my God, I love yellow. And oh my God, look at the green on these leaves. And then they stopped being lemons and leaves and they became shapes and colors. So now when I'm painting them, I'm looking for the light falling, the different colors in the leaves, the different shapes. How do I orchestrate the composition? It freed me up to go from painting lemons on a tree to making the painting something more. It's not about lemons. It's about color. It's about shape. And in the end, it looks like lemons. But I'm so in love with color yellow still, and I still haven't painted them beautifully enough. So I may be painting them the next 10 years. I don't know if I'll ever paint them as well as I want to, but they're challenging me every time I see them. I see something different, but I've grown. I have knowledge that I can build on now. And so I tell my students to paint it to death. Paint 20, 30, 40, 100 paintings if you love apples. Paint that many apples because you start to lose the sight of them being an apple, and it becomes more about the paint and what you're pulling out of your canvas and what you want to say about it, what you see. Gosh, look at this great dark triangle in here. Oh my God, there's some purple there. To me, if I'm totally tucked into something being an apple or lemon, I stop seeing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that sounds like, I don't think I've ever personally got to that level yet. So I think I'll go out and get some lemons and try it.
Okay.
All right. And I might have to make some lemonade.
You can do that. Hey, listen, you would be amazed how many times I end up eating or cooking my still life or making salad dressing with it.
What are the key principles, other than what we've talked about, that you try to instill upon students when you're teaching?
Gosh, key principles. Color, shape, brush strokes are huge. I work a lot with Okay, I think you're only as good as your materials. I am addicted to rosemary brushes, and I start with what I call a 25 stroke apple in my classes, Eric, because I want people to feel how the brush puts the paint on, and I want them to work with pieces of color. I don't know if I'm answering your questions. I think
So explain that a little bit. You're basically saying to them you have to do an apple in only 25 strokes.
yes.
Wow.
And maybe each stroke is a different color. You need. I want my students to learn to see. I want them to see the color change. I want them to feel what a brush stroke feels like. When you do a good brush stroke, it feels really good. And there's so many different ways to put paint on. You can put a lot of pressure on. You can have a long stroke and a short stroke. I think Sherry McGraw calls it, or David LaFell call it quiet strokes. You say so much with how your paint goes on. So I think that's important. I think putting your paint on, how you put it on, is so important. But you have to do that by learning to do it. So I don't want people to, I can't think of the word, but if you go over something again and again, it's not getting any better, move on. If you're painting the same stroke or tickling the canvas again and again, you're not getting what you want. I'd rather see you put a stroke down, walk away, and leave it because it's the right stroke.
Well, I remember one time with Richard, you may have even been there that day. I don't remember. Richard said, I spent a lot of years in the early part of my career correcting mistakes. And so I try to make sure that every stroke is something I'm not going to throw away and fix later. In other words, I want to get it right and accurate from the very beginning.
Yeah, what if every brushstroke could be beautiful? Wouldn't that be a goal?
Absolutely.
So I think that's part of whatever you asked me that I can't remember.
So I understand that your memory is starting to go now. Is that correct?
No, I just get excited. I love this. There's nothing I would rather talk about or do.
So anything else? I think what I'd like to do for just a second, related to what we were talking about, is we have a lot of people who are discovering painting through this podcast. You know, we're up to about 50,000 people now listening, and in just 34 weeks, something like that. And I'm hearing from people now who are saying, you know, I discovered the PleinAir Podcast and I listened to it. Now I want to learn how to paint. People who have never painted before in their life. So if someone like that is listening and they don't even have a clue where to begin, what to do, what's your advice to them?
I have to say, jump in completely and go for it. Because, Eric, I do a class called Fearless Painting, get over the fear and just get started. The first time you make a mark on a canvas, you have changed that whole picture plane and you have created something. It really doesn't matter what it looks like when you're starting. It matters that you're doing it. Every time you put a brush stroke or a color on, it affects what's next to it. And you build a painting slowly. You know, I think if you're just starting, find a workshop that works for you. Books online, study how other people do it. There's so much available right now. But it really is taking a deep breath and just jumping in and doing it, because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I only know what's going on right now. And if you want to paint, you just need to start it.
So do you recommend that somebody learns how to paint, basic principles of painting indoors before they ever even attempt going outside?
I think it makes it easier just because you don't have as much to deal with. I think the changing light can be frustrating, but at the same time, if you have a love of landscape, I think you go out there and paint the landscape. I think you limit yourself to 2 hours so that the light doesn't change so much and confuse you. I think they're basic things to start outside. You set your shadows in first. So you've nailed your light in your canvas. But I really feel also that if people have a love or they're drawn to something, that's the best place to start. I mean, if you love cats, start with cats. It's just so much easier to get pulled into something that you love to get started. And if you love landscape, I think you go out. But I think painting in a studio first, maybe in a workshop situation, takes some of the angst out of, oh my God, what do I do with my brush? I don't know how to mix color, because the still life doesn't move.
Well, certainly you can. I remember when I first started painting, and what a disaster it was. And you can eliminate so many mistakes by getting somebody to teach you a few basic things. Spend a few bucks on a class, find a good teacher. There's probably one in every community somewhere. Or, like you say, there's videos and there's online schools and there's all kinds of other things. But just get started, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about teaching the basics course for an hour at the convention. A lot of people call my workshops boot camps because I really do like to start with the basics. And I think if you can find something like that, it's a great way to start. I mean, there are also YouTube videos, Eric. There are a lot of ways to get started. But again, you just got to do it.
Yeah, and stick with it. Don't get too frustrated too fast. The one thing that I think that is really critical for everybody to understand is that it doesn't happen overnight. And I remember starting a paint class with another couple of friends of mine, and they dropped out after the second week because they didn't feel like they were making rapid enough progress. And it was like, just stick with it. And, I stuck with it and they didn't, and they were frustrated. But we're all, frustration's just part of the process.
Can I tell you one other thing?
Yeah.
This is one thing I did get out. This is the third thing I got out of my class in London, or my school. My first year there, I'd been for 2 years in the U.S. and hadn't done a lot of painting because it was mixed with other classes, but I had a few courses. And I went into I'd never really painted figure before, and I went into my life painting class, and my teacher came up to me and said, you're arrogant. And I said, what are you talking about? Because I thought I was one of the most humble people on earth, right? He said, you're arrogant with yourself. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you expect to be able to do this without learning it. And that just nailed me, and I've never forgotten it. One of the hardest things I see for people that are getting started is they expect themselves to know it without learning. Maybe they've been professional doctors or attorneys or real estate agents, or they graduated at the top of their class in art school, and they come out into the real world of painting, and suddenly they think they're supposed to know something without learning it. So I think slowing down and really learning something makes the long run a lot easier, a lot smoother, and it goes a lot faster. But having expectations of creating a masterpiece, our first couple of paintings out, even at I always want a masterpiece, but I know I'm not going to get it every time.
Well, there's some kind of an unwritten thing. People, if you were to say to someone, here's a trumpet, learn to play it, and they played it a couple of times and they hadn't mastered it, they would go, well, of course I haven't, because you have to take lessons, you have to practice your scales, you have to go through a process of learning, or with piano or any other art. And yet, for some reason, there's this sense that this has to be instant, and it's not instant. It takes a lot of work.
It does, Eric. I think part of it is because paint comes out of a tube in color. You think you should be able to put color next to each other and have it work. And it needs to be fine-tuned. That's where we come back to color. And the drawing skills, no, it'll keep you young. I know that much if you continue to do it. But yeah, it does have to be learned. And we need to be kind and gentle to ourselves while we're learning it.
Yeah.
Give ourselves a chance to learn.
Well, I think that we're going to get a lot more people learning. My goal is to get a million people painting in the next few years, because I just think, I think that it really changes something in our brains physiologically. I think, whether you're in a profession, you don't ever want to become a full-time painter. I can't walk into the studio and paint without losing my stress. Whatever stress is going on in my family life or my business life or my marriage or anything else, it all disappears about 2 minutes after I start painting.
Eric, it causes you to focus. You can't really paint and not be focused. It puts your attention on one thing. It's like meditating. It takes you out of the rest of the world. When you're really doing it, all those thoughts and things leave you, and it's all about what color is it? How do I do this? What brush do I need? What do I put next? It's a complete and total focus.
Well, there's so many things we have to remember, edges and all these things that you've just mentioned. And so what's the advice to somebody who's just starting out? Because that's all very overwhelming.
Eric, one step at a time. Get materials. Personally, I think taking a course, whether it's online or a workshop, is really helpful. If you can't get to a course, you can always study online, but I really think it's slowing down. Take time and play with the color. Take time, learn how to use your brush. Find something that you really are excited to paint.
So this raises a question. You talk about slowing down. When we look at Sargent's paintings, they have such energy and massively wonderful brush strokes that it makes it look as if he just was on fire with energy and just whipping those paintings out in moments. Richard has the same feel. You look at a Richard Schmid painting and it looks like he did that with just rapidly and with massive energy. What's the real story?
How many thousands of paintings do you think they've painted? I think if you paint enough paintings, Richard, I don't know. He numbers his paintings. I don't know how many thousands he's painted. But after all these thousands of paintings, he knows how to make a beautiful brushstroke. Sargent knew how to make a beautiful brushstroke. They knew how to mix their colors. It's, they say you're not a painter till you've done 1,000 paintings. It's like anything else. You have to learn your alphabet, to write the first word, to write a sentence, to write a paragraph, to write a book. Painting's the same way. You have to do it again and again. And as you get confident, because you have done it and you know how to do it, then you go on to the next step. And I think Richard is a genius and probably started off as a beautiful painter, frankly, if you look at his early work. But I think most of us, as we learn, then, my God, you have 30 seconds to make a beautiful, powerful brushstroke, and you do it because you've done it so many times. You know how to put that paint on. Sargent knew how to put the paint on. Richard knows how to put the paint on. We have to paint to get to that level. We have to practice.
So, final thoughts for our listeners. Anything else that you're thinking about? Any challenges that you have not yet met that you're really intrigued about beyond lemons? Or do you spend the world searching for different kinds of lemons, different colors of lemons?
Hey, when I'm traveling, I'm always looking for rocks and seascapes. Love that too. I love it all. I haven't painted the most beautiful painting I can ever paint yet. That's what I want to do. I'm completely challenged. Is this next painting going to be better no matter what it is? Or can I go outside and try a whole new subject and make it work? I just want to paint because I love to paint it, and they're not all good, believe me. I maybe think 2 out of 10 right now make it, but I keep seeing something more that I want. And every time I see what I want, I have something more to go for. So I'm sort of pulled through my life by my paintings. Did that answer that? Or?
Absolutely. Well, I think you've articulated things beautifully, and I can see why you're such a good teacher. I would encourage people to study with you, to attend your workshop. If you are new to plein air painting, we've created the Plein Air Basics course, which is really the morning before the plein air convention, where we have Stephanie and some others who are going to be kind of demonstrating the very, very, very basics for people who are kind of new to it. And that includes artists who've been studio artists who have never gone outside to paint, because it really is a completely different thing. Any final thoughts on that?
I just think getting in there, first of all, don't be afraid to come. Don't be afraid to paint. And I think the basics class is maybe a good place to learn some fear. I mean, I have to be honest, I may be bringing rocks in for people to paint because we're going to be rocky beaches. I haven't quite got this down yet, but I want to work with how you put the paint on and how you simplify so you can do the plein air. But you know what, Eric? It's all about just getting out there and doing it. I think the basics course is a great place to start before going out, especially if you haven't done it. But you know, we all learn from each other all the time. So I think just coming and getting into it and doing it is the most important thing someone who wants to plein air can do for themselves.
Stephanie, where can we learn more about your work? Where you have a website or something?
I have a website. It's www.stephaniebirdsall.com.
Well, thank you for your time today. This was very enlightening. I am looking forward to spending time with you in San Diego and hopefully maybe sooner than that.
I hope so too, Eric. Thanks so much for having me on here. I loved it. It's my favorite subject in the world, and it's just hard to get me to stop talking about it.
Yeah, I noticed.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again to Stephanie Birdsall. Lots of fun that lady is. This podcast brought to you by the Plein Air Convention, held this April in San Diego. Some of the most amazing artists in the world are faculty to teach you. It is inspiring. You will leave there a better painter. It is a phenomenal event, something not to be missed. San Diego is going to be beautiful, the iconic scenery. And we have so much more going on, including the new Plein Air Wars, which is going to be a lot of fun. It's like a game show. We're going to pit the guys against the gals. Paint's going to be flying everywhere. They have to paint with their non-dominant hand. We're going to give them a palette of unusual colors they've never painted with before. And they have to do a painting in a very short period of time. And then you, the audience, gets to judge who the winners are going to be. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Don't miss Plein Air Wars coming up at the Plein Air Convention. Also, this interview is sponsored by the Plein Air Salon Art Competition, a great place to see how you measure up, but best of all, you have a chance to win lots and lots of prizes. And there's an entry deadline coming up very soon. So take your best paintings. Remember, what one judge doesn't love, another judge might. So keep entering your best paintings. You can, they don't have to be fresh. You can pick a painting from the past. It's okay. Enter your paintings at PleinAirSalon.com. By the way, they don't even have to be plein air paintings. It's for Plein Air Magazine. We do studio paintings. We do all kinds of paintings. Lots of categories, including an over 60. There's a student category. There's lots of under 30 category kind of things. Not exactly that, I'm not sure. But enter at PleinAirSalon.com. Well, the plein air movement is still red hot, and that may be why Plein Air Magazine is selling so well. Number one selling representational art magazine in America at Barnes & Noble stores, so drop by, pick one up. Get a bi-monthly subscription of your own for half the price of the newsstand at PleinAirMagazine.com. I love doing this. It's a lot of fun. I just think it's fun to talk to painters. Let's do it again sometime, maybe next week. See you then. I'm Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of Plein Air Magazine. Remember, it is a big world out there, so go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.